Calling the agenda review meeting to order. Ms. Bowie, will you call the roll?
Good afternoon. Melissa Mason.
Here.
Josie Barnhart.
Here.
Pat Bradford.
I am here.
Judy Justice. Tim Merrick.
Here.
David Perry.
Here.
And Pete Wildebohr.
Present.
All right, moving on, we have the invocation, this is accurate, Ms. Bowie, on here, given by Reverend Jermaine Armour from St. Luke AME Zion Church, who will provide the invocation remotely.
My name is Jermaine Armour, and I am the pastor of the St. Luke Church here in the great city of Wilmington. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, in some circles you are known as teacher. So we ask that you would bless every teacher in our school system and every employee in every school. Christ came to us not as an adult, but as a child. So Lord, bless every child enrolled in our school system and those who will soon be school-aged children. And Lord, bless our school board members with wisdom, insight, and love as they lead us in the development of our most precious gifts, our children. This we ask in the name of Christ. Amen.
Ask Mr. Wildebohr to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, continuing on, I would
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. For our newer board members, going through this is when we ask the questions. As I get to each point, feel free to raise your hand and ask the questions. So starting off, sorry, let me get it on here too. We have the call to order, the roll call, approval of the agenda, the invocation. Do we have somebody for that yet? Okay. Presentation of colors, national anthem, I'm assuming, oh, we've got those. For Pledge of Allegiance, would one of our new board members like to lead the pledge for January? All right, so Mr. Perry. Then we have approval of the minutes, recognitions. Who's doing recognition? Anita, how long do you need for recognitions? 10 to 15, let's go to 15, just to be on the safe side. Student voice, we have 10 minutes. Teacher voice, 10 minutes. Superintendent's report, you're good with 5?
5.
I'm good with 5. Call to audience. We have nothing under information. Consensus items. The 2025-2026 course guide, additional changes. Does anybody have any questions? Ms. Bradford?
Is that the sheet? Ashley, is that, no. Who does this go to? No, this isn't it. Mm-mm. That's the
Dr.
contracts
Hamilton.
crossing here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
This
No,
is
I'm good.
Dr. Hamilton.
the
And
next one?
then the next one is contracts extending into fiscal 2026.
That's me.
All right, Ms. Bradford.
Is this first one, the technology for $155,000, is that the new budget software that you got? Yes. Do you want to tell everyone what you did? So I'm real proud of you.
Well, so we put out a bid to look at different software platforms that we could use to be more transparent during the budget process and then after we have the budget too. So there's going to be on our website, users will have the ability to drill down into the budget. So we'll start at a high level and you can go into it to keep drilling down into the budget. And it's just gonna help us with our communication around budget and transparency. So once we're a little bit further along, I'll definitely be sharing that out with the board as we go through.
And didn't you save us some money in doing it?
Yes, so, I think it was about we got about $20,000 off because we just really were trying to tell them if they would give us a chance to be able to purchase this within our price range, that we will, help support them. They try to roll this out to other school districts, and so, so we were able to get a pretty good deal on that software platform.
Mr. Perry?
I just want to congratulate you for the fact that the public will be able to drill down into the details of the budget. That is so awesome for transparency.
All right. So right now we have that for 15 minutes. Do we think we can do it for 5? Are we? Total for both of those? For both of those? Does anybody need, Dr. Hamilton, do you need to add any information to yours at all? During the meeting, or no? You're good? Okay. All right, so I'm going to say 5 for that. We have nothing under old business. For new business, we have the proposal for employee performance bonus ad hoc committee. That's Mr. Perry. How long do you think you will need for that?
10 minutes?
10 minutes?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Bradford.
So that is not going to be discussed today, or it's on our agenda as well for today? Because I really want some discussion before we're asked to vote on something that's this many pages. Because I didn't know about it until last night.
Well, the newer documentation was last night, correct? That you said the new, you revised it, yeah.
Yeah, there was
Right.
no access to the information before last night because I kept checking to see it. That's why I called Mr. Perry to find out what the deal was. So can we not talk about this today? Can we not talk about it now?
So you make a motion to...
Yes, I make a motion to discuss this now and get some preliminary discussion underway. Not the whole thing, but just some, because it's just a brand-new concept for me, and I'm the first time looking at this.
So that would be amendment to this agenda, which has already been approved, which will require a supermajority. So you have a motion to add it to the agenda review agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay, is there a second? So we're talking, okay. All right, any further discussion?
Can we also give a time that we'd like to have for discussion as it is? 10
Sure.
minutes, 15 minutes
10 minutes, 15
for today?
for today? We'll say 15, just to be safe.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Dr.
Are we
Merritt.
now saying that we're going to go back and look at today's agenda?
We
make
will.
an amendment to change that to add 15 minutes to talk about Mr. Perry's motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Justice? This today. All right, so Ms. Justice, can you repeat the motion? Is that an amendment to the current motion already on the table? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Oh. All right, so we're saying move this to
January's agenda review.
January's agenda review, which would remove it from the January agenda. Mr. Perry?
Could I speak to her?
Yes.
I think I've discussed this with all of them before. There's not a whole lot in here that I haven't discussed with you all of them. Maybe some detail. This is a committee. This is not a proposal for a budget or a performance bonus plan that we have to pass on to the annual. this is a committee to start moving in that direction, or the plan to come up with a comprehensive plan. It's not urgent, but if we move it to next agenda review meeting, then we're not going to vote on this before we start with it. So, I mean, what I would propose is to, is to have the 15-minute questions that Ms. Bradford suggested, and then if you still feel like you need more information, then we can vote on this justices later.
Well, we need to vote on the amendment prior to.
So I'm asking to vote no on the justices at the moment.
This does this require a supermajority? The amendment does it.
Do we have any discussion going on?
Yes, we do. I'm just clarifying. Hang on.
I think it does to modify today's agenda.
It would also modify next.
Point of
Okay.
order, yeah.
If I could join in, her motion would not mean the supermajority because she's talking about next.
Thank you.
His would, or hers would, because.
Thank you.
it's changing
Thank you,
today's
Mr.
agenda.
Whitmore.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dr. Merrick.
if I might speak to Ms. Justice's amendment. I do believe it's in policy that we need to have stuff in front of us 48 hours before we vote on it. So I think, as much as I would love to talk about Mr. Perry's ideas, I do think it's appropriate to set it off, and I will cop that I also did not do my homework. I thought this was the time that we would start talking about it, and I will take my motions and also put them onto next agenda meeting, so that I can give you lots of time to review what I'm saying.
Mr. Perry, and then Ms. Bradford.
I apologize, I got this, that you do not have it in your hands, I got this approved on Monday, or last Monday, I assumed it was distributed.
Ms. Bradford.
And just for the point of clarification for me, as I glance through this in a panic because I haven't read it, limited call to audience at a committee meeting, that's going to need some discussion. We don't normally have call to audience at a committee meeting, so I need to read all this and digest it and actually literally talk to some of you about it before we have it on the agenda. So I'm going to support, I was fine the other way, but I will support what Ms. Justice has.
Okay, and last one, Ms. Justice and Mr. Wildebohr. Yep. Correct. Mr. Wildebohr.
And I'd just like to speak to what Ms. Bradford you said. One thing you have to realize, that if you do try to add a call to audience to a committee meeting, then you're going to have to probably have an SRO here, and that's going to be a cost expense and stuff. So I think we really need some time to look it over and really come up with all those other pieces. So I would agree with that.
Ms. Mason?
Yes,
I don't want to
Dr.
speak
Burns.
for Ms. Cooley, but I'm assuming this was put into the assembly system, this
Was the
documentation.
revised one?
Yeah, or if it was, so I'm not sure if
It
it got in
wasn't
there.
there.
It wasn't in Tiffany, okay.
Yeah, I think there was just some glitches this time because the agenda wasn't there until last night.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I am going to, we have a motion, amended motion on the table to move this to the January agenda review. Ms. Bowie, will you call the roll?
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart,
No.
Ms. Bradford,
Yes?
Ms. Justice, Dr. Merrick,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, and Mr. Wildebohr.
Aye.
That passes 5-2. So we will remove that from the January agenda. The original motion is a moot point at this point, yeah. All right, so moving on, we have the discussion about the call to the audience.
Right. I will make a
Dr. Mayor?
motion that I will bring this information to the next agenda meeting, but I will give everyone lots of time to review it beforehand so that we can discuss it at our next agenda meeting.
Okay.
So you're proposing to pull it off and put it out, same as last time?
Same as the last one.
Thank you.
And I will second that. Ms. Justice?
Okay, this is the first time that we've all, I did some things that could have been differently, or our communication was,
Yeah.
but that's it, we're good.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I know this was the information, it says, cell phone use, and this was under new business. I actually, and we spoke about this, I think it was yesterday, the day before, yesterday. There were some things I had sent in, and I am following the same process I'd like Mr. Perry is following for my two subjects I was interested in. And one of them was the cell phone use. I think an ad hoc committee is necessary. And I'm talking about adding this to the next, should I wait, or I'm talking about moving this to the agenda meeting in January so we can have it done properly? Should we be discussing that now, or when we do that?
So when I was chatting with you last night, I know that we had talked about really initially just talking about the problems and how to look for, if you would like to change that, that's within your purview.
Madam Chair.
Yeah. Ms. Bradford?
Point of order. One thing that we did do last year, we created ad hoc safety committees, and there's 2 people on each one except for one that has 3. And the phone usage came under the committee I was on last year, and we did some extensive stuff. And so we've really carried that ball. So I'm thinking we already have what you're looking for. You just need to get yourself on that committee.
This isn't about safety.
But the phone use did come under safety and under the way we
When we
designated what the
delineated,
committees- what the different ad hocs were going to do. Mr. McManus and I were on that same committee together.
Could you send that information to me, I can look over it, then I can, there's enough time that I can add it to the next agenda, that'd be the best way to handle it. Because I'm not sure if we're on the same page until I look at it, I can't say it or nay.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to send to you, but we discussed it at great length. We
All right,
had 2 good
ladies.
meetings.
We need to move forward with this. Do you have a motion?
Okay, that was the one what I'm going to do.
So are you making a motion to amend today's agenda?
Yes, I would like to remove today's.
So this will require a supermajority.
Cell phone use,
Okay?
but also while we're still on new business,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, I think it's extremely important that we talk about transportation.
Okay.
Would
So
this
let's
be
go
the
with
new
the motion, first of all, with the cell phone use. And Mr. Wildebohr is seconding. And that's to move that to the next agenda
February agenda
review,
or January.
or the February meeting.
Okay.
Can you state your motion, please?
Okay, my motion is that in the February agenda meeting, we have a discussion about setting up an ad hoc committee on transportation. And I believe that is a huge issue, and I want the public to know that we need to address this and we really care about it. And that's one of the reasons I'm bringing it up right now. Because it's multifaceted, it's not just 1 or 2 things, it's not just safety, it needs to be a very deep look at something that has been ignored for, I want to say, almost over a decade.
Just for a point of clarity, when you're talking about setting up an ad hoc, that would be a decision-making item, and so we would probably put that onto the actual regular meeting.
Okay.
If there was going to be an action item. And if you could draft up all of the information that you want, any kind of ad hoc, just as Mr. Perry did, that would be super helpful.
Never voted on her first motion. We had a first and second.
Right, there was still discussion.
But we were talking about cell phones, weren't we?
Yes.
So now we're talking about transportation.
No.
I'm confused.
We're talking about adding things to future.
My understanding
agendas.
was we were still on the cell phones.
Oh, okay, I thought, all right.
We had not moved past that because you made a motion, and I
Oh,
believe Mr. Wildebohr seconded.
So it's not cell phones.
Yes.
Well,
There was some confusion on that. Is there any further discussion on the cell phone being moved to the February regular meeting? Dr. Merrick?
Will it first come to the January agenda review meeting?
All of the information will be available to us at that.
Thank you.
Yes. All right.
So now.
Dr. Perry, are you? Dr.
No,
Perry,
I'm
sorry.
Dr.
Mr. Perry.
At a point of parliamentary procedure, I think it's time to take the vote.
Yep, that's fine. All right, this, Ms. Bowie, will you call the roll?
Can you tell us what we're voting on, please?
Cell phone
Coming off
use.
the agenda review for this time.
Can I please finish, ma'am? Moving the student cell phone use topic from today's agenda to the February regular meeting agenda. Ms. Bowie?
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart,
Yes.
Ms. Bradford,
Yes?
Ms. Justice, Dr. Merrick,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
and Mr. Wildebohr.
Aye.
All right, that passes 7-0. Back to, yes, Ms. Barnhart.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make an addition to, under new business, to our agenda. I'd like to make a motion to add a letter of support of increasing our teacher pay. I found out about a letter writing opportunity that multiple school districts are adopting across the state. And in light of the fact that the General Assembly is going back into session on January 8th, I feel it imperative to do it at our January meeting. So it would be a 5-minute discussion, and I had forwarded you the letter whenever I received it, of what it says, so that you can be able to share this with all of our members, but a 5-minute discussion about addressing increased teacher pay.
I'll second that.
Would that be under old business or new business?
New
Probably
business.
Madam Chair, point of information.
Ms. Bradford?
If we're adding things to the agenda review, don't we have to make a motion to amend the agenda review before we do it, like the last one we just did, we added to the agenda review? I'm getting confused on parliamentary procedure here. I thought in order to add things at this point to the agenda review, we had to make a motion to amend the agenda review again. And I just want to make sure we follow it right so it goes down right.
This is not amending the agenda.
Are we talking for today's agenda review, or are we talking the agenda review in January?
We're talking, not the agenda review. Ms. Barnhart's motion is to add something to the agenda for January's regular meeting due to the time constraints and when General Assembly is meeting again.
Yes.
And so getting this information out and getting it sent over to them prior to them meeting.
Would that also,
Dr. Merrick? You're fine.
would that also come under new business for today's agenda? That we can discuss it, or we're just going to?
No, because the information was not posted, so.
So the vote would be on adding it to the new business of the early January.
The January,
meeting.
yes, the January regular meeting.
Correct.
Yes. All right, is there any further discussion?
I would just like a little bit more
Dr.
information
Merrick?
about it.
And I can send out that letter and send it over to Ms. Bowie as soon as possible. Mr. Perry? No, we will need to vote on it if discussion is finished. Well, that would be my decision.
Yeah.
Dr. Merrick?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to slow things down.
You're fine.
If we're asked to vote on something that we don't know about, and I thought, we're really trying to make sure that we have all the information we need before we make a vote. I guess really what I'm saying is I'm voting on whether or not we allow it to even have a discussion later.
Yes.
Right, so as long as I'm going to get the information in plenty of time, and it sounds like a lovely idea. I'm sure I'm going to be for it, but just in terms of protocol, I want to be able to have that
Absolutely.
information.
Yes.
I withdraw my question.
Okay. All right. End of discussion. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. And you said 5 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We then have correspondence, 5 minutes.
Ms.
Announcements.
Mason,
Madam
can I
Chair?
speak to that?
Yes.
Grant writer, what happened to grant writer?
We're not on that one. We're still going through the January agenda.
Okay.
Yes,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Wildebohr.
If I could, I'd like to see if we can come up with a consensus, because in my tenure, we had a lot of folks that kind of used that as a grandstanding time or whatever. Correspondence, in my thought, and unless everybody doesn't agree, should be that you got something in writing from somebody that you want to share with everybody, not that you want to talk about whatever topic you want to talk about for 5 minutes. But like I said, I think we should just be on the same page. So either we do that or we get to talk about whatever we want to for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Justice, do you have anything?
Is that a motion?
Actual correspondence, is somebody written what the purpose of the schedule to be about?
Yes.
Not just particular.
Thank you.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, but again, if the board as a whole chooses to use it the other way, then I think we should do that, but I think everybody should be on the same page, not saying, well, I'm gonna do this and he's gonna do that, something different.
And then, okay, Mr. Perry?
There was one question about next, if we, I just wanted to know if by next, our next meeting, I'm not sure when, Don, which Vincent has scheduled that appointment with the folks for the AI security, school security thing, whether she'll be able to give us a report at our January agenda review meeting.
The agenda review meeting at the end of January.
Yeah.
Or February's meeting, I'm sorry. Yeah, my plan was to bring that to you guys at the, not this agenda view, but the next one.
Okay, what are you referring to? Sorry.
He was asking some questions about our new AI programming for the camera system, the grant.
Okay, let's stay
Sorry.
where we are. Let's get through this. So then we have correspondence, 5 minutes, announcements, 5 minutes. Are we going to need a closed session? We'll leave it there just in case, and then adjournment. So that is the January meeting agenda.
135 minutes.
135 minutes. That's glorious.
Before we leave
Miss
this-
Dr. Merrick.
When you have the invocation, you don't have a time on it. Can we set a time for invocation? Last
they
month
do.
it went
They do.
on
We
and
set
on
one.
and on. And I
There
think-
is one in policy. It is listed, there is, I believe it's 3
Three?
minutes.
I believe it's 3,
That they
yeah.
have 3 minutes.
They're told,
But
they're told, it happens.
yeah,
Well, maybe we could just be a little bit more,
just emphasizing it to those
thank you,
individuals.
yeah, appreciate that.
Ms. Justice?
Okay, being that it is the first time in looking over this and what we just experienced, I just want to clarify a couple things. We go down to new business, and this new business will be for our January meeting.
Yes.
What was it, can we go through what we decided for new business?
So
one more
there is no
time?
longer the proposal for employee bonus.
Okay.
There's no longer the call to audience, but there is the letter, the increased teacher pay letter that
Okay.
I will send out to everyone on the
Okay.
board.
And my cell phone use will be for the agenda for the next meeting when
The
we meet
next-
like this, next time.
Regular meeting,
Got
yes.
that, okay, gotcha.
Mr. Perry?
There's been some discussion, and we've received an email recently from some folks attending meetings who are...
That's something that we will be discussing. I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's something that we will be discussing.
At a January meeting.
Possibly. But we will. Next on the agenda is closed session. So I'm going to call for a motion to go into closed. Yes, sir?
Madam Chair, we had a discussion that only 2 people know what it is about, and this is a public meeting. I think we either need to know what that
There
is.
was an email regarding the call to audience.
Point of order, this is not germane to where we
Thank
are
you.
now. We are on the agenda is for closed session, so I call point of order.
All right. I'm going to call for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute
Point of order.
143-318.
Point of order. You gotta. Point of
That
order.
is well received.
Okay.
I call for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11C for the following purposes: to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to General Statute 115C-402 and not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, to prevent the disclosure of student records rendered confidential under the Family Educational Rights, to consult with an attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the board, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual employed or considered for employment with the school system, or to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance by or against any individual employee.
So moved.
Second.
And you did a great job, by the way.
Thank you. It's a mouthful. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. We are now in closed.
Start with David.
Oh, man.
No,
Oh,
Judy.
it was, no, it was.
Peter.
It needs to, I try to eat it straight off. And I said,
Oh,
this
wait,
needs
that's
to
the
be.
wrong one.
So up north, and he's a big hunter too, and he said he had just had, I guess it was doe, but. Yeah. Can you sign my name? Or your name? What's today's date?
16.
Can we get him? Get him on the way. Sign?
Yeah,
Please.
we'll send it this way.
All right. We are back in open session.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Bradford.
I would move that we amend the agenda to add, under new business, the looking at the board norms and getting it signed.
I'll second.
All right. That will require a supermajority. Is there any discussion?
I would like.
Dr. Merrick?
Yes, sorry. I would like to make a mention that because we know about this, there's nothing, contentious about this in any way to approve it. However, I do want to just, in terms of protocol, throwing things on an agenda at the last minute is something that we generally frown on. I just want to make that point.
All right, noted. Anything else? All right. So since this requires a supermajority, Ms. Bowie, will you call the roll?
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart,
Yes.
Ms. Bradford,
Yes?
Ms. Justice,
Yes.
Dr. Merrick,
Yes?
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
and Mr. Wildebohr.
Listen, Mr. Wildebohr, that passes 7-0, so that will be under. All right, so moving on in the agenda, I would entertain a motion to accept the personnel report.
So moved. Second?
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes 7-0. Moving on to the audit presentation, 2024 audit presentation.
So we have Adam Sapuric here from Anderson, Smith & White to give our audit presentation for this past fiscal year.
Good afternoon. Again, my name's Adam Sapuric. I'm a partner with Anderson Smith White. In front of you, you should have a comprehensive annual financial report as well as a 3-page letter addressed to the board. The board being the governing body that actually hires us to conduct the audit of management. That letter to you is just to let you know that the audit went as planned. We had no disagreements with how to apply accounting principles. There were no new GASBs, Governmental Accounting Standards Boards. They issue GASBs that affect new items in the financial statements. There were none of those that took effect. There were no uncorrected misstatements through auditing procedures. If there were journal entries proposed, all of those were made. Basically, just letting you know that the audit went fine. We were allowed access to all the records that we requested, all the invoices, payroll checks, and that the audit was completed in time according to the engagement letter, was issued to the LGC, and has subsequently been approved. So again, just a 3-page letter letting you know that the audit went fine. The comprehensive annual financial report actually is a document that includes our audited financial statements. So we take the audits that we issued to the LGC and we add a letter of transmittal, a couple other front page documents like your list of board members and your list of your organizational chart. And then we also add a section of statistical data in regards to basically some of the data presented over 10 years. So as you're going through these financial statements, and kind of my presentation is just to kind of point out a couple of pages to you, point out where you can find our opinion letters, point out some of the key charts that are part of the audited financial statements, and then answer any questions you might have. But when you look, the first handful of pages, the Roman numeral pages, are part of that letter transmittal, part of those additional items that are, again, added, just to turn this from a one-year financial statement into a comprehensive annual financial report that does include some data for the last 10 years. So if you would turn past all the Roman numeral numbers to page 1. So again, you hire us to conduct the audit and issue an opinion. The opinion is not whether you did well this year, make money, lose money, none of that. It is about the accuracy of the financial statements. So page 1 is our opinion letter over the financial statements, and the first section in that letter are what are called the opinion paragraphs, and it basically states that we believe that these financial statements accurately reflect the net position and the fund balance for the school system as of June 30, 2024, and the year that ended. So this is what's considered a clean, unmodified opinion letter. And if you notice in that opinion section, the net position and the fund balance. The statements are much larger than they used to be 20 years ago, because there's actually two kind of gauges of what's considered equity. You take your fund balance, which is made up of your current assets minus your current liabilities, and that gives you your fund balance. That fund balance is really what you have available to appropriate, what you have available to spend in future years, again, more geared towards current assets and current liabilities. To then get to net position, you take that fund balance and you add things like the value of your buildings. The value of your buildings does not help you meet your budget, cannot spend those dollars. It also subtracts things like the pension liability and the post-employment benefit liability. Any retiree that is retired from this school system receives and qualifies, meets all the standards to receive a pension benefit and post-employment health benefits, become a part of a state pension plan. The state then takes that giant pension plan, determines the individuals that retired from here, and allocates you a small portion of that liability that is reflected in net position. This is one of GASB's infinite number of ideas to make the financial statements more transparent. Even though it's a state liability, it is reflected because you receive the benefit of that liability by hiring and having the benefit of those employees while they were employed here. So you basically, the financial statements, when you're looking at net position, it isn't a good gauge of your financial health, of what you have available to appropriate. And so whenever you're reading through the management discussion and analysis, or you're looking at these schedules, just be cognizant of whether you're looking at net position or fund balance. Expenditures that would be included in the net position calculation but not the fund balance would be like depreciation, a non-cash expense. The change in that pension liability. Actuaries make a 1% decision that the discount rate should change from 3% to 4%, and it reflects on your net position by millions of dollars. But that's not because you made or lost $1 million. That is just a change in a pension actuarial calculation. So if I am looking at the most important schedules in this statement, page 14, Exhibit 3, this is a balance sheet for all of your governmental funds. Total fund balance on hand, $22,747,000 is the bottom right-hand corner of that schedule. And Exhibit 4 is the income statement for those same governmental funds. Page 16, you can see the revenues across the top. Total revenues for the governmental unit, $362 million. Total expenditures, $365 million. Change in fund balance, a decrease of $2.6 million to go from $25.36 million to $22.74 million. So again, these two statements show all of your governmental fund balance. Again, the fund balance you have to appropriate for future years and spend on future expenditures. Did you have a question?
So the last that you were talking about was Exhibit 4?
Yes.
On what would be page 16 that's not numbered?
Yes.
Oh, it is numbered. There it
I'm
is.
sorry,
Okay.
yeah. So Exhibit 3 and Exhibit 4 are again, the balance sheet and income statement for your governmental funds, giving you your total fund balance as of June 30, 2024. Any questions on those exhibits?
Can I just, and actually from Sutton, can you help us all understand the difference between the fund balance that you talk about and the fund balance that he's talking about? Because there's a huge difference there.
Yep, so he is including the other restricted funds. And as we've talked about before, that includes scholarships and donations and other grants that we've received, that those funds have to be spent on those things. When we talk about fund balance, we are normally talking about the general fund because that's the most flexible funding that we have.
So unrestricted funds. For the
Right.
general fund, is the same.
Right, so we do have fund balance and other restricted, but there's grant funding that we get up front or other donations that we get up front, but we've already been told how we have to spend those funds in that other restricted.
Ms. Justice?
Yep, so if you look at the first column on page 16 where it has general fund, and you look at the bottom, you see that 3.9 million. That's the same 3.9 million that we talked about at our last meeting, except just as he had mentioned, some of that is restricted. So it's the very last total in that first column. Do you see that? Mm-hmm.
That general fund balance of
Okay, I was looking up the wrong.
That general fund balance of 3.9 million, the various categories are up above that. You actually have 1 million of non-spendable fund balance in the form of inventory. Inventory, things that you have already purchased, the value of the tires, oil, gas on hand, you cannot appropriate those, so they're non-spendable fund balance. So they are part of the 3.9 million, but it's dollars already spent. Now, you definitely will benefit from the inventory on hand, but it's not available to appropriate. You also have 600,000 of prepaids, meaning dollars already spent for things like contracts that might go from the 24-25 year that you had to pay before July 1. So again, those of that 3.9 million, you do have some non-spendable aspects there. And what's available really is those last three numbers as far as what can be appropriated in the 24-25 budget.
Ms. Bradford?
And if I'm not mistaken, actually, of that 3.922, we talked about the $500,000 that's set aside for emergencies. Okay, so that's still solid.
And this might be confusing, I apologize if it is, but if you go back to page 14, the second to the last, you see that same 3.9 million, and right up above that's where he's talking about those last couple of lines. You see the unassigned there, the 1.2, so you're still looking in that first column of general fund.
Got it.
And there's the last line that says unassigned right before you get to the total. That's the expendable, that's what we have available to spend, and that's what we talked about at the last meeting that we had.
Okay.
Ms. Justice?
Okay, so this gives all of that for 3.9.
Yep, so this gives you, that last section of that statement gives you the details of what makes up that fund balance. And as Adam had mentioned, some of that's restricted. You see inventories and prepaids as he just spoke to.
And going back to page 16 then, so what you're giving, separate from what him, and he's explained that quite well, is that originally at the beginning of the year, we started off with 12,500,000 approximately, and now we're down to close to just 4 million, if you look at it, close and rounding up. So what is, Okay, I'll talk to you, I'll ask questions later. That's a huge chunk of money that's disappeared. And is that usual? Because I know in the past, when I was on the board, we certainly didn't get down this low. A good way of putting it.
Yeah, so we use that as part of our budget in the previous year to balance the budget.
Straightforward, is this the county commissioners asked you to spend it down? Is this what happened?
So we did spend, I don't know that necessarily that was the entire reason for that spend down, but we did spend that money on expenditures for last year.
Ms. Barnhart?
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important to just reiterate what Ms. Bradford said about the $500,000 in committed funds, because what we have done is built that partnership with our county commissioners and saying we are going to keep $500,000, and in the event of an emergency like a hurricane, our county commissioners will step in to cover. So even though we do not have $10 million, that is the amount that they are willing to step in and cover, up to $10 million. I think the other important thing that we need to point out here is this year we were allotted $0 for capital, and I said my opinion on that. However, they've already stepped up to the plate and approved over $6.7 million to go to capital in our school system. So this is a developing continued partnership with our county commissioners. And so I understand the concern of seeing a smaller number. However, we're building in security nets and relationships so that we can continue to be responsive to the needs of our students.
Dr. Merrick?
I also think it's important to state that our reserve fund is important for more than just a hurricane or catastrophic loss. You know, Dr. Barnes has to help deal with budgetary changes as they happen, and there are lots of ways where we need to have money there in the moment, you know, that we can then perhaps pay back later, but we have to have that, you know, slush fund of sorts, right?
Ms. Justice?
500,000 is not that much. The reason I brought this up is because I did go through Florence. In fact, I came right on the board after Florence, and I saw the effect of having that large fund balance, which the people up here knows what I'm talking about, not having to go through the county commissioners, but immediately being able to, when all the other institutions in the county surrounding us were sinking. And, you know, if we have to go through the county commissioners, that's not going to make it possible, especially during a huge hurricane where they're dealing with the event. So I'm just saying that even though that's very great of them to say they're going to cover us by 10 million, it's extremely important to know that in real emergencies, and we get them here when we have something like Florence, if we have that money immediately at our fingertips and don't have to go through these different sources to try to get it, it would be just a lot more advantageous for recovery, because it's going to be a big problem if we get hit with something like that again.
Any other questions?
So you can see, again, the total fund balance, Exhibit 3, page 14, that is your balance sheet. Exhibit 4, the income statement. Just a couple, again, key things here. Total revenues of $362 million. You can see you have a state public school funding of $185 million. That's your largest funding source. And as was mentioned, when the state mandates salary changes or changes retirement rate reimbursements, for every dollar you spend in covered payroll, 25 cents goes to these pension plans and these post-employment benefit plans. When that percentage changes, it changes across the board. The state will cover their portion, but again, locally, anybody funded in this local fund, in the general fund, that comes out of your pocket. So that's, again, having fund balance on hand for those what are called unfunded mandates from the state are definitely necessary and an ongoing struggle in the budgeting process. So after that, you have a couple of schedules of budget versus actual for those same governmental funds. There were no violations of the budget. If you keep turning to page 22, so we have been talking about governmental funds and governmental fund balance. You also have one business type fund, a proprietary fund, your child nutrition fund, your school food service. So it operates in the form of it sells a service or sells a product, food. So it is not considered governmental, it's considered proprietary. It gets accounted for differently. Net position and fund balance for this fund are one and the same. So on this balance sheet is the assets for kitchen equipment depreciated over time. But also, if you look 2/3 of the way down, non-current liabilities, the pension plan and that net OPEB liability plan, those are the pension and post-employment benefits. The state calculates what New Hanover's percentage is. Let's just say it's 1.5% of the total state liability. We then take that liability and say, well, 3% of it is because you have child nutrition employees that are covered. So 3% of your total is allocated. And even that is a giant number, $7 million of liability that aren't really yours to fund. You fund them through the contributions. So instead of looking at fund balance and net position for this fund, the most important number here is at the top of the page, cash and cash on hand, $9.2 million, and that's an increase of $870,000 from last year. So again, a positive cash flow, and really should be looked at basically on a cash flow basis, give you better information than on a net position or change in net position or change in fund balance position. Any questions?
Mr. Perry?
Several of these, being new to this budget, several of these pages include categories for expenditures. Are these defined anywhere, any kind of syllabus, so we know what's included and what is not?
Yeah, there is a standardized chart of account issued by DPI. So the account structure for school funds, it's a 31-digit account structure that gives you the fund, the PRC, the program it's associated with. This is on the purpose level, and these purposes are defined again in that codified DPI handbook that can, you get a copy of what those include, but it includes all of the expenditures. It's just based on how is it presented. So you might look at a budget, or you might look at financial information that gives it on the PRC level, the program level. How much Title I money do we have? How much EC money do we have? Within those categories, those PRCs, are these purpose codes. So this is the purpose function, the purpose codes for all of those PRCs for each of those individual funds. So all of the expenditures are included, but this is just how these financial statements are to be presented, or required to be presented, is at the purpose level.
And Ms. Justice has asked for a cheat sheet the last time to show, what, like a definition or what's included in each area. So I am going to provide that to you, but I'm sorry I did not have that today. So I will have that.
So if you look at it, the kind of the lineation, it's, fund, and then PRC, and then purpose, and then within each purpose, there are object codes, like what is the different object codes for salaries, whether it's a director or a teacher, what is insurance, what is electricity or utilities, and then from there on, it's then by location. So the 31-digit account codes allows you to kind of sort through the data in any kind of detail level that you need, but for DPI's purposes, this is presented at the purpose level.
Thank you.
Yep. And actually, if you then look at page 23, the income statement. So now these expense categories are a little different. They're more at the object level. And again, that's just the presentation for a business type fund. So you can see food sales, 2.5 million. Total expenditures, operating expenses, $14 million. The biggest revenue source, federal reimbursement and grants. 23-24 marks the first year where you're essentially completely pre-COVID levels of funding. You've had years where all students ate for free at a high reimbursement rate. You've also had the last 2 years where there was a little bit of COVID-19 reimbursement rate still in the daily meal reimbursement rate, but that's all gone now. And so your federal reimbursements of $11 million, sales of 2.5, expenditures of $14 million to give you that $870,000 of positive cash flow is really more what you'll look at going forward, or what you'll look like going forward. Again, given no unfunded mandates on minimum wages, inflation, huge cost increases in food across the board. So having positive cash flow in this year, I think is a very positive aspect in your financial status, and one less thing to worry about having to fund going forward.
Barnhart?
Can I ask a few questions of clarity? I see the state reimbursement as well, because it's my understanding that they upticked of the support that they're providing and supports for child nutrition as well, and I could be misunderstanding. So I see 10,874. Is that reflective of that?
Yeah, there are certain pre-K meals that are funded by the state. That's what those represent.
Okay, so this is a different number?
Yeah.
And then, like, the collective, I know the reimbursement process happens when children actually participate in the meal process. It's not just being reimbursed for registering for it.
That's right.
So how much money are we taking in dollars that actual kids in our community are paying for, and what does that?
So that would be the difference. So if we're looking at page 23,
Okay.
the top number, food sales, that is true sales, dollars exchanged for food.
Okay.
Then the federal reimbursement would be what comes from the reimbursement of free, reduced, and a little bit for each paid meal. So even a paid meal gets a little bit of a federal reimbursement. So again, in order to be profitable in the current environment with food costs the way they are, the federal reimbursement rate has not kind of gone with inflation. There's a lot of states that are going towards a state-funded CEP program where all students eat for free. I don't know if the federal government's kind of holding back their inflationary increases in reimbursement rates. So to be able to positively cash flow in today's environment hinges on participation, getting the kids through the line. There's a certain amount of overhead, if you would, related to the salaries in a kitchen. Let's just say a kitchen needs 5 employees every day, whether you're serving 300 meals or 600 meals. And so there's an economy of scale that benefits larger schools that can have high participation, serving as many meals as possible. It's what triggers the breaking even or losing money districts from the ones that can actually make money in today's environment.
Ms. Justice?
All right, so what you're saying when you look at this, the actual food sales themselves, separate from what the government's paying for.
That's right.
Is the $2,549,000, right?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
and then you have all this from the government, and you said that our net position at the end of the year, actually we come out ahead, $3,740,000, yeah, breaking a profit.
Well, so the change in net position is the 1.1 million.
Yeah, so on top of everything else, we're getting 1.1 million from the government. We're not spending down, instead that's going into the number at the bottom, correct?
So again, instead of looking at net position and change in net position, because if you look at the expenditures included in salaries and benefits is a non-cash expense or a non-cash negative expense for the change in pension plan. So again, for looking at what you made, looking at the cash flow. So if you look at, actually the next statement is a cash flow statement, but instead of adding $1.1 million of net position, I look at this as you added $870,000 of cash. Again, it's still the same ballpark, but you're really adding cash is more important than net position, because there might be a year where you can add $870,000 of cash, but your net position might go down $1 million, and that is just because some actuaries changed the outlook of the stock market for the next decade. So for this year, net position and cash kind of flowed in the same way, both positive, but the 1.1 million is the net profit on the full accrual method for the Child Nutrition Fund in the year, but it at the same time added $870,000.
So we ended up $3 million ahead, $300,000 ahead. That we are actually, I guess, going to other things in the district, maybe some kind of fund to try to help for what you're just referring to in the future, possibly?
So the federal, or the Child Nutrition Fund is a federally funded grant, so it's restricted. So that $9.2 million at the top of page 22 can only be used for child nutrition expenditures.
So this remains, in the future, would have to be for child nutrition?
It has to be for child nutrition.
That's
Yep,
good.
yep.
That's all I need to know. Okay, good.
There is so child nutrition benefits from not having a not having to have an HR department, or not having to have an electric bill. And so you can charge them a indirect cost overhead essentially for their usage of all the school property and the insurance, all the things they benefit from the governmental funds that they don't have to pay for. DPI allows you to charge 8% of a certain list of PRC.
So that's figured in here?
So the last 5 years, indirect cost, so the Child Nutrition Fund, the last 5 years, been very profitable because of the COVID-19 high reimbursement rates, because of Hurricane Florence, higher reimbursement rates. So indirect cost has not been charged on this fund in this year, but in talking to Ashley, I think for 24-25, they will start paying their indirect costs, which it might be about $400,000 that they would pay to the governmental funds for their benefits of, again, not having to pay electricity, not having to pay HR, not having to pay.
I'll just add, that's the same indirect cost that we charge for other federal programs, and we've talked about that before. We just, last year and previously, we haven't been charging the child nutrition program because we wanted to make sure that they could stand on their own once all this extra money went away. And now that it appears they'll be able to do that, we will start charging them indirect costs, just like we do managing all the DPI federal grants.
So it's going to change next year because you will be doing that.
Yeah, we will start charging that this year.
So, so instead of adding 870,000, if all things are equal and you're able to charge them 400,000, their increase in cash will be 470. And I only bring that up because that's the only way you can take federal cash and use it for other purposes, is by charging that indirect cost, making them pay their fair share of those overhead costs.
Ms. Barnhart?
Thank you. At the conference we most recently went to, it was interesting because we talked to a county that they used local funds. That's why I was asking the number that of students that are participating. It looks like the 2.5 million of local funds. And what they saw was an actual uptick in the amount of student involvement in both breakfast and lunch. And so they ended up getting, as a district, more money back in federal and state dollars of child nutrition reimbursements. And so I was just curious that number because I know, I don't know if it's been the last 2 years or just 2 years ago, but we used our reserve money to pay off school lunch debt. And I think I remember it being roughly $400,000. And so I was just curious that number because it deals with participation. So, 2.5.
So your question is there's several factors going into that. Yeah. So let's just start at the requirement of the local fund to have to pay for unpaid for meals. So before CEP, when more schools were on a free and reduced application, students that would come through the line that didn't pay for the funds, the federal government, DPI, requires you to locally fund any unreimbursed meals because they see the setting of meal prices as a local decision. They see how to handle kids coming through the line without money as a local decision. There's back before COVID, there was an equity calculation. So it would look at the cost of a meal and take away what you were charging for a paid lunch. And if you weren't going up 10 cents every year, there would be a little calculation of what you had to pay locally. Because again, according to costs, you should be going up on meal prices, but it's hard to do. So those are the way local is required to pay for unpaid for meals. That all goes away with the COVID-19 meal program. It all goes away with CEP because, again, all kids eat for free. So you're a mix of some CEP schools, some paid schools, and you're not going district-wide because you might have some schools that really don't qualify. So just for discussion purposes, let's say that 60% of your kids qualify for free and reduced countywide and 40% were paid. Instead of giving 100% reimbursement for the 60% of kids and having them go through the line and eat and having everybody else pay, the CEP program allows you to feed all 100%, but now you're going to get 60% of those dollars. So that if the meals are the same, the dollars end up being the same. So instead of getting 100% for 60% of your kids, you're going to get 60% for 100% of your kids. And so districts that have high county-wide reimbursement rates, and it's based on Title I calculations. So 60% Title I free and reduced qualifying students, harder to make money than if you were 80 or 90. During Florence, all schools that were, or all counties that were considered disaster zones got an uptick in that CEP program, which again, you benefited from. So if you were normally sitting at a 70% reimbursement rate, you got an automatic 25% bump. And so now you are getting 95% of the 100% of the meals, and it allowed, again, for profitable years. But it really boils down to just how you are demographic-wise on your Title I percentages as to whether going full county CEP program makes sense or going school by school, which is what you're doing. Because it's not just that each kid eats for free and you get all of the money for as if they were all free. There is a calculation that reduces that reimbursement for your non-qualifying kids.
Ms. Justice?
Does that money roll over, you said it has to be spent on nutrition.
Yep.
So does it roll over year after year?
Yes, absolutely. So that $9.2 million will stay in the child nutrition bank account, only to be spent on child nutrition funds.
Okay.
And I will say that it being a federal program, it's audited at least once every 3 years for compliance to make sure those expenditures are for child nutrition expenditures, as well as part of our audit is sampling all your expenditures to make sure that funds are spent in the right categories for the programs that they're a part of.
Dr. Merrick?
So support the new kid on the block, will you? When do we make choices about whether we're going school by school or whether we would get involved in the CEP, county-wide program? And what's that? Oh, you are? I thought you said we were doing school by school.
So are you full? Yeah.
Some of our schools qualify, so if we are going to break even or come better off participating in the program, then we do at those schools. But if we have to put in local money to participate, then we did not go forward with that. But we look at that every year during the budget process. Usually Amy Stanley brings a recommendation, and so Eddie, you can speak to that more.
We evaluate that every year because there are different ways to look at it. You can look at a district as a whole, a school, an individual school, or demographically a grouping of schools. And that's typically what we do. To make sure that, we can get as many schools participating as possible.
May I continue?
Dr. Merrick?
I think there's more than one issue to be looked at, and certainly one is finances. But we also have to look at, the ease of just making sure everyone just gets fed, and the benefits of everyone getting fed, and the lack of stigma for those kids who get free and reduced lunch, that they're not seen as different than the kids who pay. So I would like to be able to have those conversations during the budget, and I'm glad that we are.
I will say, so DPI has done a good job of eliminating the stigma. Very, very little actual cash changes hands when we're talking about there. Everybody's on a number or a card. So a student that comes through, is, whether you're free, reduced, paid, you're swiping the same card as every other kid. So the stigma of free and reduced versus paid has been addressed long ago. And the key to whether you're free or reduced and some paid or your full CEP at that school, again, it boils down to participation, serving as many meals out of each kitchen as possible. The CEP program definitely increases participation, because even if a kid wouldn't pay $3 for that meal, if all it takes is going through that line and they can take off the 2 items they want, and that's where you get all the pictures of the thrown away food, but they're at least offered it. It has them in front of them to eat. So there's definitely an increase we see across the systems of participation. But at some point, when the school system just has 20 or 30% of needy, free and reduced kids, it's just not viable economically to make money out of that school because, again, just the demographics within that school or within that region.
Dr. Barnes?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we go on record, of course, to say that we rely on our principals as well. No child goes to school and comes home hungry. We will feed children regardless of the CEP status, and I rely on the principals to work through the negotiating of that if they need to.
And that's where that payment from local to child nutrition, any kid with outstanding balance at year end, it's funded locally.
And Mr. Perry?
I think was it last year or the year before, just include did you guys vote for to go with the CEP for breakfast? Does these numbers include that? Because it wasn't that county, it wasn't that district-wide, not just per school, if I recall.
If we have a school that is achieved CEP status, they get free breakfast and lunch. It's both meals.
So we do not have a free breakfast program for everyone for across the school district at this point?
We do not. Yeah. Yeah, during COVID, there were times when, we would receive breakfast, kids would receive breakfast for free. There's also, the state was covering the additional money for breakfast on the price of a reduced meal. So, but we, unless you are CEP, only CEP schools have free breakfast and lunch.
There's been a lot of, especially for this district and other districts hit by Hurricane Florence, the last 10 years of child nutrition is just, it's a moving target as far as, what do we have this year? Okay, it's Florence reimbursement rates. Now it's COVID feeding plans. Now it's back to free and reduced on some schools, CEP on another, but still a higher reimbursement rate because of COVID. This 23-24 year, again, it really marks the first year of the next chapter where there's no more free add-ons for Florence or COVID. Operationally, this is like a base year, and it's a good base year, certainly with adding 870,000, but it all the things that have happened in the past, 23-24, it was really like the first year where all that is gone and expired.
Bradford?
I just wanted to pick your brain because you've done so many of these for other districts. I was listening to a presentation yesterday, and they talked about one district that was doing a third meal, a quote-unquote dinner meal. Are you familiar with that?
So there is whether it's a dinner meal or it's called the super snack or the snack program, there is a program where you can send, and it has to be after school lets out, because again, it's a federal program, so they're very keen on timing. So they don't want you handing out Uncrustables before the day ends because that might affect how the kid eats at lunch. And so there's a lot of rules around these third meals or these third programs, whether you call it a super snack or an adult meal or a take-home meal. But yes, there are programs, and they do help with profitability because it is. They're non-labor intensive type meals. There's a lot of pre-packaging. I think you're sending kids home with, like I said, an Uncrustable and some fruit and some pre-packaged items. But not every kid will qualify. Not every school will qualify. It is a whole separate program, and it is utilized at a couple of districts that I work with, and one that I just know about to help cash flow the fact, again, that same 5 people on staff in a kitchen serving 600 meals can also prepackage 200 take-home meals for very little effort added, certainly not like adding a whole new school day in terms of meals served. But and also, again, it is meals that are prepackaged, and so I think a little bit of cost savings on cost of sales or cost of food. But yes, there is a snack program, adult meal program that your school system can look at. Yeah, well, yeah, I'll give her, and it is one of the, on a side note, I do wish DPI was more consistent on like giving avenues for, hey, just so you know, there's this other thing happening somewhere else that you might benefit from. And I don't understand why they don't do that, but yeah, there's several districts that I can, now again, it requires additional labor, additional costs for the prepackaged items. There's regulations. There's even I think a separate, maybe a software, against to make sure that those meals are going out at a specific time, like, just, again, time coding some of these meals so that you're not serving it within the school day. So again, a whole set of rules to follow, but it does have the opportunity to add positive cash flow to a district and send more food home. Yep. All right, so after that, pages and pages of footnotes over all your accounting policies, all of the information on your current assets, what makes up receivables and payables, roll forwards of your fixed assets that are part of that net position. There's pages and pages about the pension and post-employment benefit plan, all the actuarial assumptions they use to calculate that. I'm not going to go over all those, just for the record. Real quick, page 64 starts the statistical section, which is the 10 years worth of data. So if you wanted to brush up on the last 10 years of financial activity, this is where you would start. This is, again, the parts that are added to the financial statements that are officially a part of the audit. But again, again, be careful. Are you reading about net position or looking at net position, or are you looking at fund balance? Net position's not the same thing. And even when it comes to the business type fund, cash on hand is more important than net position there. So after the statistical section, there's also some just information about the county, top employers, taxes, but page 100, we're almost through. Page 100 starts kind of the second part of what an audit is. So page 1 was that financial statement opinion letter. Again, conducting the audit requires us verifying all of your assets and liabilities, testing your expenditures, testing your revenues, sometimes analytically, sometimes on a sampling basis. All the audit procedures, again, over those accounts, over those financial statements, but also is a component of compliance. So while we also do a financial statement audit, we are looking over state and federal programs to make sure that those expenditures spent out of those funds are qualified expenditures, no misappropriation of assets, no spending money for things outside of the major program requirements. And then while doing those two audits, we look over internal controls. So the first page, 100, is the first letter letting you know that while conducting our audit procedures over finances and compliance, we noted no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your compliance structure. Every invoice we pulled, every payroll check we pulled, every process we looked at, there were compliant or controls in place and working to safeguard assets and safeguard compliance requirements. Page 102, the second of three letters. Now I will say page 102 and page 105, those two letters are the exact same. One is for state compliance and one is for federal compliance, and they both are considered, again, clean, unmodified opinions. We noted no misappropriated expenditures, no non-compliance with state or federal requirements for the programs that we audited as major. Basically all money spent in accordance with the various programs. For this year, on the federal side, we audited your COVID-19 funds, your Head Start fund, and your Title I fund. And on the state side, the state public school fund, your largest funding source, that has to be audited for compliance every year. We also looked at your NC Pre-K program, your CTE programs, driver training, lottery, and a state capital infrastructure grant as your state major programs. And again, across all of those programs, no compliance findings, no question costs, no misappropriated assets or non-compliance with program requirements.
Dr. Merrick?
It sounds like Ashley is to be congratulated. Yeah, I'm just guessing here, because like I said, I'm new, but if we've got really no substantial issues over a period of time, thank you. We like it when our audits look good.
And I'll share that with my staff too, because certainly I need them to be able to do that.
Yeah, our audit is, again, the 100-page document that is produced at the end and the 30 minutes talking about it here. Before all that happens, it's hundreds of hours of pulling documents, pulling support, 2 visits on site where we take up her best conference room on her floor and take up all of her staff's time just meeting our needs and meeting our requests so that we can verify, test, and observe financial compliance and state and federal compliance requirements. So it's a big undertaking, and her and her staff did an excellent job preparing and providing us with everything we needed.
Ms. Bradford?
Is there a bottom line number here in here anywhere in terms of our total ESSER?
Yes, page 112. So this is your schedule of major state and federal awards. Middle of the page there, $31,562,000. That is the total of all of your what we call education stabilization funds. It's made up of CARES, CRRSA, ARP, the ESSER, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, however you look at it, but they're all a giant cluster totaling $31.5 million.
That's this year.
Of federal funds spent this year that essentially most of those programs are expiring in 2 weeks. A little bit of carryover in a couple of those programs. And you can see some of the things that they are paying for currently, math enrichment, CTE, school psychologists, retention, summer school. Like there's a lot of programs funded federally for the last 3 or 4 years that need to be looked at locally going forward.
Ms. Justice?
Yeah. How often is this audit done, and who requests it?
So the local government commission requires you to have every year audited, financial statements, compliance.
So it's an every year thing?
Every year. On the compliance side, aside from you have to have an audit every year, have to have these financial statements presented every year. When you look at your state and federal programs, the determination for those, any federal program that spends over $750,000 has to be audited once every 3 years. Okay. Same thing with every state program over $500,000. Now, the state public school fund, so large, it has to be audited every year.
Okay.
The COVID-19 funds have been considered a federal high-risk program and had to be audited every year. So we actually looked at the COVID-19 funds every year. They won't be, their last half year, they're not going to be considered high-risk funds. So we'll be back on a normal rotation of at least once every 3 years, looking at like Title I, EC, SCI, but we have to audit every major program once every 3 years, and we have to at least have 20% of your federal dollars audited every year.
And Mr. Wildebohr?
Well, I'm going to echo what Dr. Merrick has said. Ms. Sutton, congratulations. Dr. Barnes also. I remember the days as a principal, so I want to reach out to our principals because I know that we sweated through some things. The treasurers for sure, your whole department, everybody involved. So congratulations.
Ms. Justice?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to reemphasize. So the ESSER funds on page 112, these are going to disappear. This $31,500,000.
Yeah.
Basically, it's going to disappear at the end of the year, so we're not going to have those funds to be spending in the future? So this is going to be...
We budgeted for that. That was part of last year's budget process, so we planned for that for this year. So we went through, we were looking ahead to this.
Okay, that was last
So
year.
that was last year's
Gotcha.
budget cycle.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Okay, I was panicking for a second. 'cause
as,
I had
as
heard-
auditors, we mess everybody up because we call this year the year we're auditing, whereas this is 6 months removed from this year.
Okay.
So, yes.
Are you living in the past?
I live in the past. I live forever living in the past, looking 1 year back, but somebody's got to do it.
Any other questions? Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Yep, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a grant writer. Ms. Justice, you brought that forward. Did you have
Yeah, I
anything?
would like, Dr. Barnes, I would like to speak to him about this for multiple reasons.
I think he just
He was-
took a moment for the restroom or something. He'll be there.
Well,
Do you want to, yeah, you start the conversation.
Well,
What are your thoughts?
in the
This is what
past,
you
we
want.
had grant writers, and I'm not sure when they disappeared. I know from having been in this district since. Sorry about that. No, it's timing. What were we talking about? Grant writers. I know, since we've been here forever, some people, started back in the 80s, anyway, that we have had in the past grant writers that brought in a lot, I mean, not just a little, they more than paid for themselves. So I'm not sure when they disappeared, but the discussion is, and I think this is valid for the whole board, because we need as many resources as we possibly can. What is the history of this? Is this a possibility in bringing this back, and what would we have to go through to do something like that?
Sure, so you're currently looking at the grant writers for the district. Dawn's written them, Eddie's written them, Robin, me, Jen, and I'll tell you that that is a specific skill set that I may not have. It's as easy as putting it into the budget as a position for next year.
Okay.
The only concern about that is I've made a pretty committed effort to putting any money we have towards schools and not towards our central office. So it would be something that we would be fine to put it into the budget for next year, but it would be part of the budget process to hire that position.
Well,
Dr. Merrick?
I've never hired a grant writer, and I have no idea how you format their contract, but is there such a thing as a contingency?
For the school system, that's a difficult thing to do. We could do it on, all employees in North Carolina are at-will employees, except for the ones in the school system that are contracted. Teachers, administrators, me. So what we would be able to do is create a position. I would ask Jen to create a job description and make for that. I think it's a great idea to put it into the budget. I think what we could put in the job application is some kind of contingency that it would be a trial for a year. If that person makes that job,
Pay.
gosh, I hate to say that because it sounds awful. You
No.
know, pay for performance, but I think that because grant writing is the way now that we can supplement the loss of the ESSER funding and other things like that, I'm fine with putting it in, but the board would have to be aware that we're really holding a hard line to put in positions in schools, not central office. So that would be a sort of a caveat to that work. And as long as you guys were fine with that, I think that would be fine. It would become a recommendation I'd make to you. You guys approve my budget that we bring to you. So, yeah, I have no problem putting it in there if you guys would think it would be valid.
Ms. Bradford?
This is one of my pet things.
So I can stop doing it.
I've been harassing for 2 years now. And if we'd had it in the budget last year, it would have gotten taken out for EC or teacher's assistants or something. So remember this in 3 months when we're approving a budget, that we need a grant writer. But I've even asked them to look for somebody with dual skills, grant writer and teaches math, you know, so that we could end up that way. It hasn't happened. In 2 years, I've been, because I understand the importance of a grant writer and how much more money we'll get and how much of their time that'll free up, because writing a grant is a specific skill set that is just very specific, and you're either good at it and you get all the money, or sometimes you lose them. So I'm really excited that y'all are in favor of that, but keep this in mind, because there's only so much pie. And if we're going to put that piece of pie in there and says grant writer, it's going to have to come away from something else.
Ms. Barnhart?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was also going to suggest in this conversation, one of the things that we could do to potentially expand our resources is partner with the county. I believe that they have a grant writer on staff, so like to help, once we have solidified the grant asks that we're making either from our local endowment or statewide grants or CTE grants, whatever it is, to potentially have that pathway with that already hired grant writer in the county that they're paying for. And so I think that's something that as we have this conversation, I'm fine with having the conversation to put it in our budget, but I think it's also something that we could potentially tap into without having that paid position.
Dr. Merritt?
I think over here, I think David had his hand up before I did.
Mr. Perry?
I do have some concerns about, not about the grant writing position, but I have some concerns of what kind of direction or limitations I have a lot of concern over a lot of these federal grants that we get because they come with strings. And a lot of these grants, there's strings involved. So I don't have a problem with having a grant maker so long as we can set the policy as far as what strings we're going to be able to accept or not accept. The temptation is always take the money, take the money, take the money. But you got to look at the strings because oftentimes in the long run they can be more detrimental than the temporary influx of money.
No, Dr. Merritt.
Thank you. No, I absolutely agree with you. In terms of, if we do it right, it should be a return on investment that's a cash positive, right? So although we have to put it into a budget and say, uh-oh, where is this money going to come from? It should pay off. And of course, that's the contingency of, maybe the 1-year contract. But also, I don't know enough about the budgeting process. I know that we took a little bit of money out of the fund balance that we didn't realize. We had some people retiring, whatever. We had some extra money, and you created some extra positions this year. Outside of the standard budget, is there a way to say we're going to take money from a different fund in order to hire this grant writer?
So for me, the commitment that I made sort of early on in my time was that this was not, we could not take anything out of our fund balance. But this was not the year to put a lot back in it anyway, because we had caused such the perfect storm of the ESSER money ending, the decrease in enrollment. We cut a lot of positions. And so my commitment was that any money that we were able to not find, but save. Sort of the example that I used was 1 month I looked at my family's expenses, and DoorDash made up like $500 of that. And so I said, we're not using that anymore. So the next month it was $40. So that $500 was saved. So what we did is we saved, we scrimped, we tried to use vacancy savings, and we found $1 million that we could put into schools. So could we do that with a grant writing position? We could. I would feel more comfortable if it was part of our overall budget process, simply because I don't want to sort of, I'm really trying to make sure that we hold that fund balance where it is, if that makes sense.
I get you.
Now, could we find probably the cost of a grant writer? Yeah, we could work that out, but if I found that, I would rather put that in the schools this year, simply because they struggle with the amount of staff we lost.
Right.
Ms. Justice?
We want EC teachers age
The
too.
reason I brought this up, because I know in the past, it was very successful in this district. I left in '99 or something like that. But it was a very integral part of bringing in a lot of money. And then it's just increased over years, because I've written grants too in other districts, stuff like that.
Right.
It'd be more than bringing back the money. And, that would also help us with working with the endowment.
Right.
Because that is a major part of how they construct their, their gifts. So,
And we do have several grants that are currently running. We have the one for the ATR, which is Advanced Teaching Roles, and that's several million. The Early Learning Facilitators, over 3 years is 7 million. But I think that, I don't want to speak for all of Cabinet, but we will be really happy if we weren't the ones writing grants. So I think that, but I would want that to be part of an overall package, because right now, our goal is to build trust with the community and transparency with our budget. And so I think if we could say, we're putting this into the budget and here's why, I think that would make sense. Although you're right too, Mr. Perry, that sometimes we would have to explore what strings come with what. Because there are some times that you have to understand that, sometimes you get a grant, you're also committing to sharing your data, making sure, things like that happen, but we can always agree on what we're going to agree on before we do that. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk too much.
I'm just so excited about all of this. Is it possible that we take Ms. Barnhart's suggestion, and between now and then, we ask the county, because if the county has a grant writer, they're on the county payroll, so we're brothers and sisters here, and ask them, I don't know if we have any grants in process now that we're writing now, but once we've done our part, send it over there and ask them, hey, would you mind putting your eyes on this? Kind of like an editor would do. And just take advantage of the fact that it's a county employee already on the payroll and get that assistance between now and then when we get into the budget process and we get into next year. Because we do have, hopefully we've got some grants in the process between now and then. Am I out on a limb
We have
there?
several that we're currently working on.
So what would it take for you to ask them? I mean, I'm willing to make a motion here that we ask the county, can you help us with this in the interim, fill the gap between now and when we can get a grant writer and help us?
Yeah, we have, I mean, we sent you guys, and you don't need to make that a motion, I can just do that, but
I want to make a motion.
we did share with you guys the grants that we're currently writing for the endowment. We put that in, you guys were shared with that. So I think it's a great idea to pass that over and say, hey, take a look at this and give some feedback. Sure.
Awesome.
Was that a motion?
Oh, I'll make that motion. He says we don't need it, but I don't care. Let's do it anyway.
I mean,
Make my day.
Was the motion a second?
Okay, well, any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Very good.
thanks.
You're welcome. Great discussion. Moving on to old business, we have the board norms. Previously, when we had our, a different board, prior to having our new members, we all signed the board norms, and we wanted to make sure that the new members got to participate in that as well, and just so that people know what we're signing. It says, as members of the New Hanover County School Board of Education, we acknowledge that all decisions made for the district are to ensure the safety and high-quality education of the students that reside within its boundaries. To this end, we therefore agree to adhere to all established policies in regard to how we conduct the business of the New Hanover County School District. We agree to adhere specifically to the language found in the following policies: Policy 2010, which is Board and Superintendent Relations, Policy 2120, which is Code of Ethics for School Board Members, and Policy 2122, which is Role of Board Members in Handling Complaints. General expectations include, but are not limited to, treating other board members, students, staff, parents, and vendors respectfully and professionally at all times, returning phone calls, texts, and emails. The chair of the board and the chairs of each committee will include all members in key discussions prior to meetings. In the event of agenda changes, notifying the board chair and each other as soon as possible. Be prepared with questions for clarity for fellow board members, superintendent, or senior staff prior to the agenda review. Always clarify when making public statements that is your personal opinion/stance and not that of the board unless you've been given permission to do so. Respect the position of the superintendent and board chair and funnel requests for information through them. And board members will put the betterment of self, staff, and students first in decision-making and respect the decisions that have been established by the majority vote of the board. And so all of our board members present this afternoon, it's not evening, have signed, or will be signing it
I have one question.
this evening. Yes, Mr. Perry.
Please, can you define what respect decisions have been established by a majority of the vote of the board? Respect in the sense that I have to agree with it now?
No.
Even, I could say, well, I respectfully disagree with what was made, but it was the decision of the board. Is that good enough, or do I have to be all team?
No. Respecting the decision of the board means that the decision was made, and you didn't have to agree with it. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Barnhart, if you wanted to add.
I'm happy to add to this. There have been times that I have not agreed with the decision of the board, but it was my job to fulfill what the decision of the board was to do. And so it's understanding that once a vote has been made by the decision of the board, it's our opportunity to speak freely, to oppose things, to agree with things on the dais. But once the board has made a decision, it is the board's decision to do that. And so to understand that as a role of a governing body, we have to come together. sometimes putting our pride aside, whether or not you agree or disagree with it, to fulfill what the direction of the board is. And so I think that's what it means by that. I do want to draw attention to one of number 6, and these all go back to these policies. Policy 2010, 2120, and 2122. I know coming on as new members of the board, it's a learning curve to understand different things. We oftentimes are told information that the public does not know about to start. So being cognizant of information we're given and not sharing that prior to decisions being made, and making sure that your opinion and your stance is your own and not reflective of a board stance, unless, as I stated, if it's a board decision that we've come to a conclusion. Per policy, I believe the chairperson is the one to speak on behalf of the board, unless if she or he delegates a surrogate for that. So I just want to bring that to the attention. I know as we are out in the community, we are entitled to our own different opinions, but understanding the representation of the board is not our job.
Dr. Merrick and then Mr. Wilbur.
I noticed on item 4, in the event of agenda changes, notify the board chair and each other as soon as possible. I thought that there was something already in policy about 48 hours.
These are reflective of. So these are parts of these different policies. It's just pulling specific ones that we wanted to highlight.
Right, but isn't there a codified amount of
Yes.
time?
Yes.
Okay, so as soon as possible is vague, and that's all. I'm just trying to take the vagary out of it.
All right, and I was just going to mention that number 1, I think, is probably the most important of this whole thing. You know, as Mr. Perry mentioned a moment ago, we're not going to always agree on everything, but as long as we can talk to each other in a civil, I'll use the word civil, tone, and, if we disagree, we disagree, we vote, and, that kind of ties it into the last one, where we respect at the end of the day, we may not agree, as Blinky over here said, we may not agree with everything that is said on the board, but at the end of the day, we respect. It doesn't mean we have to agree with what is said, but we respect what, none of us have any power. We all together have the power. So the board makes a decision, and that's the end of, that's it.
Yeah, I did, but to follow up on what he said first, we are only the board when we're sitting here. Out there, we're not the board anymore. And it's a whole mindset that coming off the campaign trail to being a board member. But just to clarify so that nobody goes away feeling badly, if you're bringing something to the agenda late, and just send it to all of us. Like if you had known on Monday to send that to us, or call us up and talk about us, we could have heard it. But it's just hard when you get 5 pages or 4 pages to do it on the spot and do a good job of it. And it's not being mean. It's just, like if I come up with an idea, like if you had called me and said, hey, can we put, grant writer on or would you be in favor of that? I'd have gone all over it, And if you'd had a handout, you could have sent it to us. In other words, you don't have to turn it into Crystal to share it with us. You do have to turn it into Crystal, but you can share it with us as soon as you got it.
Okay. We're all going to say, let's have some grace here. We're all learning the procedures.
Yeah.
And the procedures have shifted some. We put some of the procedures in place. And I would like to say this too. So far things look like they're going smooth, and that's the way it should be. Some of us, Pete and I, have both experienced the opposite, where people were not trying to be smooth. And we need to work together to make things as respectful and productive as possible. So,
Any business? I don't see any, and there are no committee reports. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those in favor by saying aye.
I want to say
All opposed?
oh,
Passes
you can
7-0.
stay here all night.